Welcome back to the Vinyl Brotherhood, my friends. Thanks for joining us for our review of a very classic rock and roll record from a band whose influence could never be overstated. That band would be The Doors, the iconic bluesy psych rock band from the 1960s, made up of Rob Krieger, John Densmore, Ray Manzarek, and of course Jim Morrison, but really, they need no introduction. We're all familiar with their big hits like Light My Fire, and many of us even know their discography like the back of our hands, but I think it's fair to say that in the public consciousness, there seems to be far more attention given to a certain couple of Doors records, namely LA Woman and the self-titled debut, and that's no surprise. They are fantastic records after all, but today I wanted to shed some extra spotlight on a different Doors record, my favorite Doors record, Strange Days, their second major release from 1967. Yes, it houses a major hit or two, but there's still so much that Strange Days has to offer, and while the Doors faithful in our audience will hopefully be in agreement, my hope is that this review reaches the yet-to-be-initiated. And that's the funny thing about reviewing a nearly 60-year-old work. It seems like everything that can be said about it has been, but we're going to do our best to hopefully bring some fresh perspective to the table. So let's take our LP and head over to the record player and get into some Strange Days. So Strange Days have found us indeed. On our album cover, we have an eclectic group of circus performers, the usual suspects as you can see, and some graphic design work. Don't look too closely. It's a little on the obvious side, but you know, product of its time. There's the back side. And you have the liner notes and a nice photo, a very famous photo of the Doors. Pretty cool, I like that black and white. It really captures their essence. Okay, so it is kind of understood that many of the compositions from Strange Days came from the same time frame, the same sessions as those of their self-titled debut. Yet this album sets itself apart with a slight shift in direction. The blues influence on their music has been somewhat tempered in favor of more psychedelic and art pop stylings. Some may argue that they had already used up their best existing material on that first album, and while I can appreciate the raw talent displayed on the debut, I find myself more drawn to the equal doses of sophistication and weirdness that Strange Days has to offer. This work also sounds far ahead of its time to me in a way that the more widely celebrated Doors albums do not. As an appreciator of 80s post-punk and art rock, I find it easy to trace much of those movements' creative standards and tropes back to Strange Days, if not the Doors in general. The opening bars of Strange Days exemplify this quite well, actually. The first time I heard the walk down via Moog synth, I almost couldn't believe I was listening to something from 1967. And this is only the beginning. All over this album, we find the Doors working those creative muscles, on the hunt for new sounds, new recording techniques. The opening title track already treats us to a bit of that creativity, even beyond the aforementioned synthesizer introduction. Jim Morrison makes his larger-than-life presence known with a warbly, appropriately spectral vocal effect as the rest of the band plunges us into the foreboding, cryptic atmosphere that the Doors are often known for. And that's not to say that these guys don't have range. They aren't the poppiest of rock bands. 95% of their music, in fact, steers clear of the usual feel-good pop chord progressions in favor of blues, jazz, and Eastern influence structures. And even within the established framework, we're exposed to a wide variety of styles and sounds on Strange Days. For the blues rock appreciators, we've got a quintessential Doors classic in Love Me Two Times. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have these fascinating psychedelic detours like I Can See Your Face in My Mind and Unhappy Girl. And so we actually just reviewed a Franz Ferdinand album a few weeks ago, and I must say, Unhappy Girl sounds like the one song that could be responsible for that band's entire existence, from the smooth, lethargic vocal down to the avant-garde melody. And I definitely detect a resemblance, and it really is a great sound, one that would inform some Doors classics down the line. And I must say, I'm especially impressed with Robbie's chameleon-like guitar work. It could be that the guitar has more flexibility in terms of profile and aesthetic, but he masterfully shifts his tone and technique to best serve any given song. Moonlight Drive, for example, calls for quirkier, slippery playing with a cleaner tone, while Lost Little Girl features a chimey tone and more of a technical picking style. And of course, my personal favorite, My Eyes Have Seen You, has Robbie shining front and center with a biting, fuzzed out, blues-driven guitar lead that masterfully drifts to and fro from main riff to improvised solo work. If you're listening in stereo, you might notice that they usually have Robbie placed on the right side of the mix for the most part. And on the left, we've got Ray working just as hard, establishing motifs and doing much more than playing a support role, as we often see from many a keyboard, or in this case, organ player. Ray elevates Your Lost Little Girl with surprising embellishments, and he practically makes that song for me. And his driving, forceful presence on both My Eyes and the title track give those songs the extra punch that they need, creating a perfect backdrop for Jim's vocal work. Now, Jim Morrison has become a sort of mythical figure in the world of pop music, and so much of what made his singing so special can be found on Strange Days. Like his fellow bandmates, he boasts stunning versatility and a keen awareness of what the music and the themes are asking from him as a performer. Throughout the course of this album, his smooth baritone suggests a hint of eeriness, and we occasionally witness that unsettling croon evolve into a menacing growl, and eventually his brutal and iconic scream. He's basically Willy Wonka ushering us, his unsuspecting guests, onto the little boat, and at the drop of a dime, he becomes a more whimsical, enigmatic Willy Wonka, as we see on People Are Strange, the well-known song that musically leans into its ironic and humorous subject matter of isolation. I'd argue that it's one of the more straightforward lyrical works on the album, and yet it's so vivid and effective, pure poetry while being somewhat modest, something that probably wouldn't apply to Horse Latitudes, the cryptic spoken word entry that I'll admit I'm often tempted to skip over. So Strange Days closes out with When the Music's Over. It's textbook Doors, maybe even a little more sparse as far as instrumentation goes, at least by comparison with the other 9 tracks. It's a lengthier tune at 11 minutes, giving the band ample time to build the song, progress the song, even show off a little bit. And I'll admit it's not my favorite Doors closer, not because it's weak, but because their other closing tunes are just that good. Think about it. You have The End, Riders on the Storm, 5-1, but we're judging Strange Days by its own merits today, and When the Music's Over does more than get the job done. I especially love the dueling guitar solos about 2/3 in. The song ends with a big exclamation point, Jim screaming, cymbals ringing. I wouldn't have it any other way. This is one of many songs that demonstrate the band's mastery of tension and release. Every song on this record just takes us on a ride through various highs and lows, through dreams and nightmares alike. I would describe this album as a full experience. The band walks in, does a bang-up job, clocking in at a near 30 minutes, and steps out while they're on top. There's not much more I can ask from a collection of music, and nearly 60 years later, it would seem that generations of listeners would be inclined to agree. Strange Days has proven to be a timeless work, and a timeless work it shall remain. And I know I've been delighted to revisit the album time and again over the years, and I don't doubt that many of you feel similarly. So please feel free to share some of those thoughts and stories in the comments below. I'd be delighted to read them. So I have a few more thoughts I'd like to leave you with. We're gonna head back, and I'll just close this out for the day. I do think we're living in a time where it is somewhat in vogue to be dismissive of the Doors or downplay their accomplishments. I, for one, have trouble taking such criticism seriously. Sure, you could argue that the Jim Morrison legend may be overblown, but countless long-celebrated acts receive this similar and better treatment completely unchecked. And at the end of the day, the music of the Doors speaks for itself. I didn't grow up with the band. They don't really hold any nostalgic value for me, But in the few years that I've become familiar with their work, I've found it to be nothing short of revelatory, and that's hardly a hot take. And honestly, the biggest challenge in preparing this review was in trying to find something new and valuable to say. I like just about all of their albums, but to me personally, Strange Days is the one that has resonated with me the most from beginning to end. So I recognize that they have stronger music elsewhere, but for the time being, this is my Desert Island The Doors record. Maybe it isn't their masterpiece, but it is a masterfully crafted project. That being said, I'll be scoring Strange Days an 8.5 out of 10 today, and we'll also be giving it the coveted thumb of recommendation. Go listen to Strange Days and let us know what you think. How would you score this album, and what's your favorite song from Strange Days, or any Doors album for that matter? So yeah, that's about all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank you for watching from the bottom of my heart. If you don't mind, feel free to do the usual YouTube things such as liking, subbing, sharing. It's a huge help to us, and that way you don't have to miss out on any of our upcoming music reviews as well. And believe me, if music is your special friend, you'll want to stay tuned. So that's it. I hope you have an awesome week, and we'll see you again very soon right here at the Vinyl Brotherhood. Cheers.